All right. Hello, everyone. It's time to begin. Welcome to our fourth meetup. We've had a lot of them lately, and this is the fourth one. Glad to see you all. And this is a very special meetup since we have one guest speaker that is not a member of our Riga offices, someone from outside of Zabbix. And also, we will have Alexei Vladishev speaking today, so get ready for that. Usually brings some really interesting news, and of course, you will have the chance to ask him some questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this meetup where Alexei will be answering some of the maybe more complex questions that you can ask throughout the webinar, not the webinar, but meetup. So first off, let's go through the basic ground rules. So all of our microphones will be muted except for the speaker, of course. You can ask your questions for the speakers in the Q&A section. And you can use chat for any discussions, comments, networking, anything that you please. We also have a hashtag, Zabbix Meetup Online, that you can use on social networks if you wish. Share your experience or just general comments. Always welcome. It's nice to see members of our community just participating all over the web and commenting on Zabbix. So, without further ado, let's begin. So first off, just so you know who's speaking, my name is Artur Slontons. I'm a support engineer, consultant, and a trainer for Zabbix. Maybe you remember me from previous meetups. And let me introduce now our first speaker. As I said before, Alexei Vladishev is here as a speaker, the founder and CEO of Zabbix, the kind of mastermind behind this whole thing. So let's welcome him. Welcome, Alexei, and let's talk about Zabbix a little bit. Let's hear from you. Welcome.
Well, yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our online event. And I guess there will be three very interesting talks. But first of all, I would like to introduce a little bit of kind of overview of what we are doing here at Zabbix right now. All right, just give me a few seconds to share my screen. I guess it should be fine now. So, well, first of all, of course, all of you know that Zabbix 5.0 LTS has been released this year, and it's been quite important for us since it's an LTS, long-term supported release. But now the whole Zabbix team is working very hard on delivery of Zabbix 5.2, our next release of Zabbix. And I will not go deep into details what Zabbix 5.2 is all about, but just will provide you some overview, just higher level functionality that you may expect in 5.2. First of all, 5.2 is going to be released in mid-October. This is a current estimate. Of course, there could be some delays. Well, it's ready when it's ready, but still, at this moment, the expectations of our dev guys is that, well, we are going to release it in about 4 weeks' time. All right. So actually, I think just a few weeks ago, we have updated our roadmap, which is currently available on zabbix.com/roadmap. This is quite a usual location. And there you can find not only what we expect to deliver in 5.2, but also a little bit of a longer term vision, what might be implemented and what we want to be implemented in 5.4 and also 6.0 LTS. I will go through some of the features, but first of all, if you go to the roadmap page, you can click on all those releases like 5.2 or 5.4 and V6 6.0. And you may see immediately the estimated time of arrival for all those versions. Our release cycle, let me remind you, is 6 months. Okay, so every 6 months, half year, we are releasing a new major version of Zabbix. So 5.2, what you may expect to see. First of all, it will come with a smart anomaly detection, and this is kind of one step to the baseline monitoring when Zabbix will be able to give you some insights on the trends data which is already collected by Zabbix. Things like the average number of transactions increased by 24% in September comparing to the previous month. It all will be possible. High availability, performance, and scalability. There will be a number of improvements. And the first is that Zabbix UI and Zabbix API will support kind of load balancing out of the box, so that you could deploy Zabbix API, Zabbix UI, and have basically kind of a horizontal scalability. You may deploy it on the multiple loads with a load balancing scenario. Also, starting from Zabbix 5.2. We are moving into a direction of having the horizontal scalability for all components of Zabbix, including the kind of core components related to the data collection and trigger processing. So the first step in this direction would be to separate basically the data collection component from event generation and real-time kind of analyzing engine, the problem detection analyzing engine. So that's what we hope to start work on this in 5.2. So it will lead us to the horizontal scalability and the future releases of Zabbix. What else? Another big news is that starting from Zabbix 5.2, we will support natively some of the IoT protocols like MQTT and also Modbus. It's been possible already with the help of some external script, but it will come out of the box and supported by Zabbix agent. So it really helps Zabbix to monitor some IoT devices just out of the box. What else? In Zabbix 5.0, we implemented numerous features related to improved security, to some security-related functionality. But Zabbix 5.2 is coming with some more stuff related to security. One is, I think it's really important, is role-based permissions. In addition to what we already have in Zabbix, quite, I would say, flexible the way how we define permissions, which could be based on a kind of the relationship between host groups and user groups, and also the tags for problem view, for customized problem view. Now we are introducing roles. So basically, it will be possible to define different roles for different users. It really gives us much more granular user permissions. That's what many users are waiting for from Zabbix, and I know that it's highly anticipated feature. Another improvement, which is really important, especially for those who are very serious about security, is ability to keep secrets, all sorts of secrets, like various passwords, API tokens, different IDs, usernames, anything in an external vault. So instead of keeping this information in a Zabbix database, you could keep it in an external vault so that it will be completely separated and managed by someone else, not by Zabbix itself. So this is a huge improvement in the way how we keep secrets and how we manage secrets in Zabbix. There will be also some improvements related to the usability and user experience. I will just mention a few of them. For example, the support of time zones for different users. This is especially important if you use Zabbix. If users of Zabbix are in different time zones, you say you have part of your team in the United States, part of the team in Europe, maybe in Japan, so that different users may have a different time zones, and information presented in the Zabbix UI will be adjusted accordingly to your time zone. Also, another quite, I would say maybe a minor improvement, but really, really important, and it adds to user experience, is ability to define and save filters. So you define a filter, for example, in monitoring problems, or you define a few filters, you save them, and then with just a one click, you can switch over from one view, from one filter to another. So I think this really super useful feature for all users of Zabbix. And this is just a higher level overview of what is coming in 5.2. If you want to learn more, of course, you have to wait when Zabbix 5.2 will be released, and then we will talk in much more details about functionality of Zabbix 5.2. Again, Zabbix roadmap contains also some information about what is expected in 5.4, for example, and in 5.4, we plan to introduce some interesting things like, for example, synthetic monitoring. Its ability to create a complex scenarios for kind of multi-step scenarios for monitoring. And it would really help us to do two things. One is to define, for example, if we have some complex authentication, so that we, as a first step, we may authenticate ourselves. Second step, execute some service to check if it's up and running, and this kind of one scenario and use case. And another use case is to make a complex service checks. For example, if you want to test if our API is working correctly, then we may first create some object using this API and then verify that the object was really created. So this is what synthetic monitoring is all about. And obviously, there will be a number of other general directions for Zabbix 5.4. It's like advanced event correlation engine. We'll continue our way to make Zabbix a very scalable solution. There will be many additional usability improvements and in Zabbix UI and much more. Yeah, well, so that's it from me today. And well, just after all talks, there will be a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, well, please feel free to ask them. Maybe one after 1 hour. So, well, thank you very much, and have a great time today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you a lot. Don't go anywhere yet. Like you said, we'll still see you at the end during the Q&A session. I have already marked some questions for Alexei, so we have them coming in, just so you know, some quite interesting ones. So thank you. And next up, we have our guest speaker, Sven Putteneers, all the way from Belgium, a technical product manager for Telenet. And he's going to be describing for us and maybe talking about how they solve some problems in a very interesting, very complex Zabbix environment. So next up, let's welcome Sven with deploying Zabbix as a multi-tenant, multi-team monitoring tool. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the lovely introduction, and thanks for having me. I am going to tell you in the next 20 minutes about monitoring in time and relative dimensions in space. What this big term means, you will know. I will explain during my talk, and it is quite complex. So first of all, I'd like to tell you about what I'm going to talk about. So first, I'll tell a bit about our current setup, which problem we actually encountered, and how we try to solve this. First, we had an initial naive solution, which worked somewhat, and then we came up with a much better solution. I will also show you an example of what we did, and I'll talk about some future possible developments a bit as well. So, first of all, who am I and who is the company I'm working for? My name is Sven Putteneers. I have more than 20 years of Linux experience. Monitoring and maintaining Zabbix deployment has been a part of my daily job for the last 4 years. And needless to say, I love Zabbix. Its versatility, the fact that it can ingest a huge amount of data without the slightest hiccup, it's wonderful to work with. So the company I work for is Telenet. It's one of the largest telecom operators in Belgium. We have quite a lot of equipment on customer premises, and we offer monitoring as a service to our customers. So our Zabbix deployment is actually set up as a multi-tenant monitoring system. And internally, we have multiple teams that are responsible for some part of some devices that are monitored by Zabbix. So our setup, We use Zabbix long-term service releases. Currently, we're still on the 4.0, but our goal is to upgrade to the version 5 before the end of the year. We have about 2,000 values per second coming in. And as I stated, we offer monitoring as a service to our customers, which means we make heavy use of proxies, both for security and for easy maintainability. We have a huge variety of kinds of equipment to monitor and to support. For example, network equipment like switches and routers, but also security cameras. We also, because Zabbix is our on-call paging service, we have multiple alarm regimes. For example, some customers require 24/7 monitoring around the clock. Some of our customers are happy with just monitoring or at least alerting during normal office hours. And we also have some hosts that are just there for data collection, some of the hosts with only calculated items that are used for reporting, and those should never send out any alerts at all. So with this complex setup, what is the actual problem we encountered? So I would like to start off with an inspirational quote. I found it somewhere on the internet. Couldn't find the person to attribute it to, but still, in my opinion, it is a very nice summary of our daily job. It states that monitoring is the art of getting the right information in front of the right people at the right time. And in my opinion, that's basically the one sentence summary of what our job is supposed to be. So here, the problem statement, the problem we ran into. On the right, I try to make a schematic overview of what it looks like. If you're a more visual person, then maybe that can help show the complexities of our setup. So first of all, the question is who must receive an alert? Because every technology that is out there in the field is supported by a different team internally. Yeah, not all alerts for the same customer should go to the same backing team in our office. So when do we have to send alerts? Because not all customers want 24/7 support. We don't want to wait on-call people when it's not needed. It makes for very unhappy coworkers, and that's not a nice situation to be in. We also want to know which customer does the device belong to. That's part of the correct information. I mean, if there is an alarm sent out to a support technician, they need to know which customer the equipment that is malfunctioning belongs to, especially if an on-site intervention is required, because obviously they need to know where to drive to. And on top of that, for most of the alarms we generate in our monitoring, automatic incident tickets need to be created in our internal CRM system. And on top of that, to make our jobs as Zabbix admins easier, we want to keep this maintainable and easy to comprehend. So this is the problem we faced. How did we try to solve it? Our initial approach, we decided that who is responsible is a property of the customer, meaning that alarms are sent to the team that is responsible for most of the devices that are at a certain customer site. When will we send out alarms? The alarm regime is also a property of the customers. That means that we can forget having data collection only or reporting only hosts unless we turn off explicitly all the alarm triggers for those hosts. Which customer device belong to? That is something we try to make clear by using the customer name as part of the Zabbix host name of the device. And for the automatic ticket generation, all the alarms of severity high or higher, they generate an automatic support ticket, whether that's actually useful to have or not. So the initial approach, it was not bad, but not perfect either. For example, we have some customers with mixed contracts. Take, for example, a customer who has some network equipment, but some security cameras as well. The alerts go to the wrong team from time to time, because as I stated, the alerts go to the team that is responsible for most of the equipment, not for all of the equipment. And on top of that, customers might decide to buy more services of our company, and which means that the dominant type of device for a specific customer, it might change over time. When the alarms are sent out is also a property of the customer. So as I stated, it's impossible to have hosts that are there just for data collection. And using the customer name as a prefix to the host name, it is a nice thing to have. But we noticed by doing that in reality that it requires quite some discipline to name all the devices according to our naming convention, especially if an existing customer has new devices that have to go in the monitoring. We need to make sure that we use the same customer name in the host name for consistency's sake. Long customer names causes reliability to suffer, especially in the Zabbix dashboard when Zabbix abbreviates a host name to say the first 20 characters. Customers with long names, it meant that we could only see a list of customer names, but the interesting part being the host name part was cut off. And we've also encountered some creative abbreviations for customer names, which meant that it was not clear at a single glance which customer the device actually belonged to. So we decided to improve upon that. And how did we do that? Well, we decided to use host groups, not just to group logically hosts that belong together, but to trigger actual changes in logic depending on which host groups a host belongs to. So we decreed that every device must belong to 3 host group categories: a tech host group, an alert host group, and a customer host group. On top of that, there are some optional host groups that can override some default alarming behavior if they're present. And the cool thing is that the membership of these mandatory host groups can be monitored by Zabbix as well. It is in fact the case. We created some scripts that pull the Zabbix API every so often, and using a Zabbix sender and a Zabbix trapper items in our configuration, we just check whether our Zabbix configuration is correct. This has eliminated some otherwise unnoticed misconfigurations quite a few times already. So the tech host groups, they depict which team is responsible for that specific host. For example, tech networking, tech IT support, tech data center. This determines in effect which team gets the alerts for a specific host. And this is a one-to-one mapping with the teams we have, the support teams within the organization. The alert host groups, we have 3 of them, 24/7, 8/5, and none. Those determine when alerts are sent out. And alert none is useful for those hosts that don't require any alarms going out, like data collection only hosts or fake hosts with calculated items that are very useful for reporting purposes. And the customer host groups, that's quite simple. It's just a label we attach to every host, and that gives a unique and a very descriptive label for which customer host belongs to. If a customer has multiple sites, for consistency's sake, we use nested host groups. This is also a very convenient setup to schedule maintenance windows for planned outages. It's quite easy in Zabbix to schedule a maintenance window for all the hosts belonging to customer XYZ, and the maintenance window is complete and correct. But we still follow the convention of prefixing host name with customer names. We found that it makes it easy to see at one glance which host or which customer a host belongs to, and we decided to keep that convention. So how did we set that up? This is an example of an alarm, an action path we have. I will show you. Here you can see which alarm regimes the alarm is corresponding to. So yeah, looking at the name of the alarm, IT support 8.5, it means this is the alarm path for alerts that occur for hosts that are the responsibility of the IT support team during work hours. So both hosts that only require support during work hours, but also those outside, of course. and the host is the responsibility of IT support, and the time period is between work hours, then the alarm gets sent out. It's this whole custom condition expression that ties everything together and that makes sure that only the alarms corresponding to all these conditions actually get sent out. And yeah, this is the operations. It's just basically send out alarms to the support people and have some escalation in there if something goes wrong and they can't fix it within SLA time. So this works well, but we have some ideas for future developments and improvements. One of the things is we don't only have technical support people, but we have service delivery managers and account managers as well. Those are the people who have weekly or monthly status update meetings with customers, and they use their Zabbix dashboards to see what happened at the customer site for the past time, so they know what to say during their customer meetings. It is quite easy to give them access in Zabbix to the customers they are interested in based on the customer groups. Right now, the alarming first in the initial solution, where the alarm should go and when they should be sent out was a property of a customer. With our current setup, we have pushed this down and made it more granular, and now it's a property of the host. But sometimes it makes sense to have even more fine-grained control. And for example, send out a specific alarm for a host to team 1, but another alarm for the same host to another team. We have looked into using alarm trigger tags for that, and it looks promising, but we just haven't gotten around to implementing it yet. And sometimes, it makes sense to have more than one tech group responsible for a host. It used to be that there is straight on one tech, one alert, and one customer group per host. But we have changed our scripts that do the checking of our configuration to use Zabbix context macros to allow for overriding this default setting on a case-by-case basis where required. So in conclusion, we found that using host groups as directives for logic actually works really well. And the nice thing is that because these multiple dimensions our monitoring is using are orthogonal, we can set all the parameters independently from each other. It's just a bunch of different host groups that have no dependencies on each other. The downside is that setting this up initially is quite a hassle. You have seen this one example, but there is one of these boys for every tech and alert group combination. The upside is that once this is configured, adding new hosts to the system is quite easy. Just assign the correct host groups and the alarming works as it should. And expanding other functionality that we even haven't thought of yet in the future shouldn't be too difficult because the setup we now have is actually quite robust and extend itself for future improvements. So I hope that showing you how we do things has given you maybe some ideas or some interesting insights in how you can improve your own alarming in a generic way. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sven. So we have a couple of questions, and maybe I can throw some in also myself. Maybe have you encountered some sort of misconfiguration in your actions? For example, if you have both 8x5 and 24x7 group included in the same action, and what happens then? And have you encountered it before?
We have, of course, encountered this specific kind of misconfiguration. Let me show you my example again. And find my laser pointer thingy. Cool thing is that this is the actual custom expression that determines whether the alerts should be sent out. And you can see here it says C or D.
I think we cannot see anything right now.
I stopped sharing my screen. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, let me fix that quickly. Okay, should be back. Can you tell me when you see anything?
I see it now, yeah.
Okay. So this is the complete condition that determines whether an alarm should be sent out or not. And if a host is both a member of the alert 8.5 and 24/7, then both C and D are true, which just evaluates to a single true here. So it means that in practice, a host with this kind of misconfiguration, there would be one action path followed for during the work days, which is this, and this sub expression would just evaluate to true 2 times. And it will also have alarms outside of working hours because it's still a member of the 24/7 group. And of course, our internal consistency monitoring would flag to us that this host has 2 other groups and it should be 1, and we should fix it.
Oh, so you do actually have some sort of internal consistency monitoring tool also?
Yeah, we have a fake host that is it's called monitored entities configuration. And it is backed by a few scripts that call the Zabbix API, fetch all the hosts, fetch all the host groups that these hosts belong to. And it calculates whether every host is just belonging to one tech, one alert, or one customer group. But with using Zabbix context macros, we can override it because, as I said, sometimes it makes sense in specific situations to have multiple tech groups for the same host, for example.
Okay, thank you. That's actually really interesting. We have a few more. Don't go anywhere yet. So let me see. Let's see, a question once again for you about the actions. Are you encountering any problems that could be caused by the time period in the conditions? Because if the trigger fires outside of that, no action will run. But I think your actions have covered all of the time periods, correct?
Yes, this is one example. Outside, if time period is not in 1 to 5, blah, 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 then an alert gets sent out if the host belongs to host group 24/7.
By the way.
Excuse me?
Not seeing your screen right now, by the way.
Not. I am still sharing. Wait, give me a second. Let's try again. Is this better?
This is better, yes.
Oh, okay. So we have a separate action for 24/7, so alarms outside of working hours. And time period should not be between this, and the host group should be alert 24/7. So for the same host, different alarm paths are followed depending on whether an alarm originates during work hours or outside of working hours.
Okay, one more question for you. Do you use nested host groups in your environment for any purpose?
Yes, right now we just use them for 2 things. For customers that have different sites, just so we don't have one customer group where 5 different sites are just lumped together, but we have some kind of hierarchy. It makes it easier, especially because I don't think you can see. I should have made this window a bit bigger. But we also put the customer host groups in the alarm message that is sent out, and it's easier for technicians to see, hey, this is our big customer ABC, but the problem is at his site in Brussels, for example, and not his site near the coast. And the other thing we use nested host groups for, but that's something completely different, is to make the distinction between hosts that should where our technicians should be able to manually close alarms and hosts that should be read only for our technicians. Because if you want to give a technician permissions in Zabbix to manually close alarms, you have to give them all the permissions over a specific host. And we didn't want to do that for all the hosts that belong to their tech group, but just for specific hosts that, for example, fire some of the devices we monitor. They send out an SNMP trap when something goes wrong, but they don't notify us in any way when the thing that went wrong is okay again. So the only way is create an alarm when something goes wrong and tell the technician in the alarm description, if you rectified the problem, manually close this alarm, please, because the device doesn't tell us when everything is okay again.
Thank you a lot. Really detailed and nice explanation. And one more for you. I think I've seen this question a couple of times before during trainings and so on. But let's say you have a core network equipment failure. So do you use dependencies or anything like that to, from what I understand, the question is, if you don't want to receive alarms about everything behind that equipment, right?
The notorious email storm from Zabbix.
Yeah, so how do you do that in your environment?
Well, since we're still on Zabbix 4.0, we cannot make use of the proxy host dependencies that are in vanilla Zabbix itself since version 5, I believe, or 5.2. I'm not entirely sure.
5.
Yeah, exactly. So one of my colleagues created a script that will also fetch all hosts monitored by proxies and do some magic behind the screens and tweak their alarm conditions so they only fire when the proxy is reachable. We're still waiting. We're waiting with very much anticipation for host dependencies, because since we're monitoring customer equipment where we're not necessarily responsible for their switches and routers, but we do need to notify somebody when something goes wrong. We have sometimes servers that Zabbix reports are down, but they're still running fine as they are. But the problem is the switch in front of the server between the proxy and the server is down. So the proxy cannot reach the server anymore. And it thinks, server went down. So we're thinking about either waiting for a host dependency feature in Zabbix itself, or extending the scripting we have for proxy host dependencies now, and see if we can make something that implements host dependencies.
Mm-hmm. And a small question before I let you go, actually.
No problem.
Really interesting one, so I don't want to miss it. What about authorization? Do you use internal authorization in your environment or some other approach?
The environment, the network environment where our Zabbix central server is completely cut off from the internet. The only access we have is through a VPN tunnel, and that VPN tunnel is secured by our company AD server. So it means in order to access the Zabbix dashboard, you need to have a company laptop. You need to use a company laptop, and you have to have domain accounts from the company itself. Mm-hmm. And that's the security we do. And the security between our central Zabbix server and the proxies that are on customer side, we have a VPN tunnel, either IPsec or OpenVPN, to every customer site, and that's the only path that is allowed for Zabbix proxies sending information to our server. And on top of that, we use TLS encryption for all the communications between the server, the proxies, and the hosts, Zabbix agents, and the proxies.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the login method within the Zabbix itself is internal. Those are internal Zabbix users that you're using, right? No LDAP integration or anything like that.
No. The authorization is in order to access the environment where the Zabbix server lives. Mm-hmm. In order to log into the Zabbix server itself, the device that guards the VPN access, so to speak, it can, behind the scenes, when you log in, it can make a callback somewhere, and then we switch some flags and do some stuff. So this user is also automatically logged into Zabbix.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Sven. I think we can let you go now. As you can see, quite a lot of interest in your specific environment and how you do things from our community members. Thank you for being here, Sven. Was really having you here and having this great talk.
If there are any more questions, I think you guys can. Do you have my email address to share? I'll put it in my slides, and I'll share them as well.
Yeah. Put it in the chat also. I think you can type it in the chat yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm probably one of the 10 persons still remaining that doesn't have a Twitter or a LinkedIn. So unfortunately, I cannot be reached there. But good old email, I'll answer as soon as I can.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being available to our community for questions or comments. hopefully we'll see you sometime around, maybe during our online event at the end of the year, or maybe some other meetups or something like that.
Sure.
Okay, next up, moving on, a colleague of mine. So back to our local speakers. Another technical support engineer, also a consultant at Zabbix. He will be talking about API, the notorious API, something that I think Sven mentioned at a couple of points also, probably for switching those hosts around proxies when proxies go down or something like that. I guess he must have used API for that. So let's have a brief look at the API, and let's welcome Aigars Kadiķis with Zabbix API Level 1. Welcome.
Hello there. I hope you can see right now. You can see me, and now I will share the screen. Sharing. I hope it's visible. All right. Let's jump right to the Zabbix API. This is a big, like a kickstart guide for every Zabbix new user. If you look forward to have some hands-on experience with Zabbix API, then this demo, this topic will really bring you goods. Okay, let's jump right to the topic. Why I'm here? What is my deal with this topic? What is the message I want to spread? Of course, I want you to think that everything is easy, like a copy and paste. That documentation is your friend. And after all, I will show some examples from real customer cases, what you can accomplish through the API. And actually, this will be accomplished right from the Zabbix interface. All right. And the first chapter is how to use Zabbix API through the graphical user interface. If you want to test out calls, it's not required to jump instantly to the scripting. No need to do that. And for this task, I offer you to install Postman, which is available for any platform, Windows, Linux, Mac. And some really good benefit is that while you're using this application and you will authorize with the Google account, most likely, this means that you can save all your snippets to the cloud. And if you do have multiple computers in your environment, and once you install Postman on other computer, then surely you can authorize and again access all your favorite snippets, all your collection you have figured out so far. So that's a really good thing to have. And yeah, the last reminder that if we want to accomplish something, then it's really good that tool supports this logic. Like you can use the official documentation page to grab the snippet from it and publish inside this Postman. Right now, in upcoming slides, I will guide you in detail how to use this Postman once you have installed it. So the first screenshot here, what is the interface, how it looks like. On the left side, there is a collection list where you will do the save all your fancy snippets, the procedures, and including all the arguments you like the most. So yeah, this will be saved to your Google account. In the middle of screen, there's the API gateway, the thing you need to reach out in order to use these API methods. And of course, it's everything is accomplished through the front end. If the front end is down, then you cannot use Zabbix API. So you need to point out to the front end, additionally write this API _JSON RPC-PHP, and everything is done. And here, the first call, the syntax of the call, it's a JSON format. And this time I'm using the very first procedure, user.login, and by posting a username as an attribute API with the password Zabbix, we are requesting the session token here at the right side. And this session token will be required to use in upcoming steps. Whenever you decide to accomplish some interesting task, you need a session token to do that. Here on the left side, I have an example, list all triggers in a problem state. If I click on it, here is the next example, which is really copied from the official documentation page. And here you must publish the very first session token, which was obtained in the previous step. And after clicking this send button, you have been welcomed with the JSON response again, and it will list all the triggers which currently are inside the problem state, inside the instance. Okay, what other conveniences this Postman can bring? That's not all. At the right top corner, there's a button which is called Manage Environments, and this is really a must, like a really best practice in order to not deal with this session key all the time. It's really great to invent these environments. If I click on this button, it will bring to the wizard where I need to click create an environment, and this environment will be called production. And this gets really useful if you do have a big installation, if you have a test environment of Zabbix, when you test, of course, all the things beforehand. And maybe, test is one environment, production is different environment. And also a use case when you have running 4.0 installation, which is LTS version, fairly reasonable choice. And if you decide to migrate to 5.0, you can test all the API calls, also like really make sure that everything will work out well on the very recent versions. So you can also create here multiple versions. Okay, after clicking add, I have only one environment here, and I will close this wizard with X. Now, in order to work with these environments, I just select. This time it will be production, and now the dynamics, I can now substitute the URL with this variable and also the authorization key. And the real benefit will start when you grow the collection here at left side. Currently, I have only listing all the triggers in the problem state. If you have here 10 API calls, and of course, the session key will expire someday. You do not need to change the session key on every call here. You just enter again this global environment section. You replace the session key, and you are ready to execute all those API functions here on the left side. All right, that's it for the chapter 1 when I introduced how to use API through the graphical interface. Next chapter is API scripting, and I prefer the language Bash, which is available on most Linux platforms. And all the calls will be performed through the curl utility. It's available on any platform. JQ, it's a utility to locate elements inside the JSON output. And also you can just make an output much more beautiful, much more enjoyable to observe from the command line. And here some comments how to install this utility on various Linux platforms. Last step, also quite useful. Maybe for some reason you're a fan of the Zabbix software, but you are not really working inside the IT department. So this means that you do not have any access administrator rights to install new software. So a workaround also can be, you can install this curl utility inside your home directory, set it executable, and it's enough. I promise you the curl will most likely exist inside your Linux operating system. All right, what next? Here is the thought process, how to think of if you decide to create a flow, how to work out this flow. The very first task is to go to the documentation page, and there are like almost hundreds of procedures how to do some specific task, like a lot of methods. And here one example, alert.get. And you will choose this method. Most of the methods are designed in a way so you can really copy and paste, because here, for example, argument action ID, this action will most likely exist inside your stock Zabbix installation. If you want to do some customizations, just replace the integer. Yeah, so the first task, the first step is to pick your API method. In the next step, open your favorite text editor and escape the double quotes. Don't even think to do it manually. Of course, yeah, here are some 20 double quotes. You can do it, but that's not efficient. Always use this replacement. And after that, you can put like this API call, the original call, only the double quotes are escaped you can put inside the curl, and it just works. And notice here the letters in green are all escaped, like the double quotes are escaped, but there are two double quotes on screen which are not escaped. And that's the reason you cannot swap these steps. You cannot do the replacement at the you cannot do replacement inside the last step. It won't work. It will break consistency. You have to follow the order. Okay. So this was the thought process. And now finally, one example, a really working example, how to use some longer script to show some useful information inside the command line. And here is all the logic. At first, I'm specifying some attributes. What are the variables inside my script? And now the first step always should be authorization. The last step should be logout. If you do not respect this logout, once you execute a million times this script, I will promise you the front end will be very slow. So please always respect this logout procedure. It's a must in order to design a really great and it's a great script. And in the middle there is the actual logic you need to execute. And this time again I'm executing trigger.get function, the same function which was like a sample inside the Postman. All right. What other conveniences I need to have in order to design a good sequence inside this bash script? By default, when you execute this curl, it will print output everything in one line, like this line in the red. It's not so readable, not even enjoyable. And maybe you want to locate some specific attribute inside the output, maybe the name of the proxy, maybe the ID of the component. What to do? You can enter this JSON pathfinder.com. You can paste this red sample inside the left panel, and optionally you can click this button, beautify, and it will instantly make the format the same. It will format the red example like quite readable. And now at the right side, you can use your mouse and click what kind of information you want to locate. You want a proxy name, just click on it, and it will suggest what JSON path to use to locate this element. And now I can use this JQ utility and use the same suggestion which was provided here. Only here I'm locating second element by an integer 1. And this time here, I'm just pointing I need to have everything inside array, and it will just list all the proxy titles, and it's much more enjoyable. One proxy name per line. It's quite readable. Okay, now the final part of my presentation is popular use cases. What kind of situations I have faced with the customers as well. The first example is log file monitoring, and also, and in the same time it correlates with SNMP traps. This was a little bit mentioned in the previous presenter with the SNMP traps. And what are the problem characteristics? I have a really huge log file, and there are a massive input written inside every 1 second. So everything is stored in one item. And also I have some logic inside the trigger, which will extract the error line, some error code. So the event generation mode most likely be multiple. And after all, no recovery logic, like you mentioned with the SNMP traps. The trap comes, but there's no way to recover the trap. So the main thing is we have a lot of patterns, and usually I can tell, please, their customer create 600 patterns, and he will not be very happy about this suggestion. I will not create 600 triggers. So what's the solution? A solution can be utilizing Zabbix API, and we have an action defined right inside the interface. And here currently on screen 5.0 interface, but you can have this same approach in any other version. In the first step inside the action, I will notify this person about suspicious line inside the log file or suspicious trap coming inside this trap fallback item, for example. And in the next step, I have some remote command defined. If I click this edit button, I can see that I have a sequence defined to be executed on the Zabbix master server. And to see the details, I will go to the next slide. So this is the API sequence, which has been scheduled to execute, to be executed through the action. The reason why this script works at first is because we have a global attribute defined at the global level. What is the API endpoint? What is the password for the username? What is the user? And now, again, we are conducting authorization. At the last step, we are performing logout, but the magic happens here, acknowledge and close the event. And this works because the action functionality itself knows what is the event ID. When the event like pings the actions, when the event ping the action will know what is the event ID. And I will use this event ID just as an attribute to the method event acknowledge. And I will close the event, and that's it. No need to create 600 triggers anymore for one log file. Just to, if the goal is just to receive the email about suspicious line inside the log, then this works quite great. Okay, next use case, maintain global macro via API. And the ambition is that this is reflecting with some session tokens, session bots. So there are some services which are requiring to have some access tokens to work with. And these services are working with, for example, with the HTTP agent. And the user can say that, I know the way how to obtain this token, but please give me the way how to update this token, how to maintain this token inside the global level, inside the Zabbix application. So solution is to use Zabbix a bash script. And here again, authorization, the first logout at the end. And in the middle here, this time we have two steps, quite interesting, two steps. Why two steps? The reason why here are two steps is because whenever we operate with some elements inside Zabbix, we always need to know what are the IDs of the objects. What is ID of the item? What is ID of the host? What is ID of the host group? We need to know the ID. So in the very first API call, I will say dear Zabbix software, I know what is the macro title, but please tell me what is the macro ID here. Global macro ID. And this result will give you the ID, which is actually an integer number. So you have this ID. In the next step, you can go a little bit more aggressively, and you can say, dude, I know the ID, here it is, and please set the value like this. And it will just replace an existing value inside the global macro. And the reason why it happens is here, argument 1 will be the macro name, and argument 2 will be the value of the new macro. And in the real practice, the way how it will look like is here is the bash script. We need to pass the first element inside the single quotes. That's a must. If you use double quotes in the first step, it will go crazy because bash will expand this $ time. That's not what you want. And inside the double quotes, I'm using explicitly the double quotes because sometimes I want to use I want to expand something. So here's the way how to update directly the value. Here is the way, if you know really one-liner to obtain the token or some variable you want to maintain. And if the thing to obtain variable is quite complex, you can even point to the script which will be executed, and the value will be expanded here and updated to the global macro value. Okay, next use case 3. This is where I get really excited. Imagine if you can, if this session token, if the session token which is required to work with Zabbix API, imagine if this session token is already configured inside Zabbix at the global level. Like this guy, this string is active. You can do some things with the API just because it's active. And of course, API endpoint is also required. And here's the command how we can obtain this token via command line. And what conveniences this technique will provide us if there is one active session token? So the answer is, when I was talking about log file monitoring, these 600 patterns, and I will close this event through the Zabbix action, then the sequence was quite old, but now I can do very same, but only with one part. I need to only execute this API procedure to acknowledge the event, and it will close this event, and that's it. And here all the variables, the session ID is obtained from global settings of Zabbix, and also the API endpoint, and it just works. And also, no need to escape double quotes. Like the previous thing I was mentioning about escaping double quotes, it's not beautiful. Let's face it. But this time, this in green, this is really like we see inside the documentation page. And I will go now to the interface. This is how it looks like really inside the Zabbix software. If you want to close these SNMP traps, which does not have any recovery pattern, you just have to be responsible and maintain this session token in a global level, and then you can write these 15 lines of API script, which is quite readable, and that's it. It will close the problem. It will close the problem manually in a way, but just because it's scripted, it will be an automatic way for you to close the event. All right, next use case, it will be two more. Use case 4, using this global session key right inside the HTTP agent. And let me give you one problem right now. What is happening currently with the modern Zabbix installation? We can have multiple proxies, but currently there is no automated way to monitor if the proxy disappears. If you have 3 proxies, you need to manually create those items. If you have 15 proxies or 100 proxies, you need to create manually that item which will say this proxy is totally offline. And here again, the dynamics from the global settings. What is the endpoint? And the JSON request here actually inside the HTTP item. How crazy is that? We are actually conducting and posting JSON data across the API inside the Zabbix application. And this is discovery rule. I will try to discover proxies right now. Under the preprocessing, what happens? I'm locating what is the path of the proxy list, more precisely, because here is the raw JSON response, which is by default, if you conduct from the command line, it will be the answer. And just because using this syntax, I will a little bit create a much more enjoyable list to use in the next step, which is mapping with the low-level discovery macro. Here, I just write the proxy name macro, and which is a low-level discovery macro, and I just map with the path inside the JSON tree, and that's it. Now with this in the account, I can create an item prototype, which will check what is the access time for this proxy, when it was the last time it was reachable, and we can have a trigger prototype which will fire up a trigger if the proxy is not reachable for 30 minutes or something. And this is quite useful, I think. And the last example is delete inactive hosts. And this is, again, interesting. This time, so the use case is that if you have really huge environment and thousands, 2,000 hosts, and maybe for it gets quite hard to spot which hosts are like totally offline and not reachable for 1 week, for 2 weeks. And this way you can automate something. And so in order to help to like remove these hosts which are not reachable, of course you will link this action to the trigger. So like agent is not reachable for 5 minutes. It's a trigger. And if this trigger stays in the problem state for 6 solid days, I can send, after only 6 days, I will send an email to Zabbix administrator, like say, the host will be deleted soon. And after like a week, after 7 days of the trigger is being in the problem state, I will execute Zabbix API. If I go to the edit, I have here again one tiny 10 lines snippet, which is conducting host.get procedure. I'm passing the host ID as an attribute, and all other characteristics is extracted from the global level, and it just works. And funny thing though is that the event, which was in the problem state for 1 week, it will disappear because we are deleting the host. So the only evidence that there was a problem about this host is inside the administrator email about this message: the host will be deleted soon. That's the only evidence which remains. All right, that's it for the use cases. The last slide is some tips if you like this topic, if you want to get some hands-on experience. What are my suggestions? Please use a dedicated user for the API calls. That's much more professional. There's if you really use if you start to use massively everything later on, maybe some massive APIs will consume a lot of CPU power for this front end. So it will be much easier to determine where is the problem. You will somewhere in the logs you will see that the API user is causing trouble. And also curl is available for any Linux platform. But if you are familiar with Docker containers, if you use Alpine container, then curl is not available there. You cannot create these fancy looking actions. So the workaround is to use the Docker container with some bigger container like CentOS. And the last example, if you do not like to install additional software, JQ utility, you can still accomplish some of the parts by using a standard grep with the help of Perl library. So you can locate some elements, some IDs, some titles of the host name by using such syntax. All right, that's it for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Aigars. Very technical, very nice use cases. People are already waiting when they will be able to get their hands on your presentation to try and maybe copy some of these API calls and implement them in their own environment. So a couple of technical questions first. So let's see. First off, why did you choose Bash?
I was expecting this question to coming. How to properly answer? There were a lot of information about Python, but at the first glance, I have not yet figured out how to really in a fast way how to use documentation guide and then pass all the arguments to the Python. I have not that figured out. That's one reason, and the second reason is that the Bash is available inside every operating system. And I will attach another reason about the Python. It still requires some dependencies, in a stock operating system, you have to install 30 packages or something. It's quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that is clear. Another thing about the authorization token that you're passing, when does it expire? Does it get? How does that work?
I was expecting this question to come. How to properly answer? I think I will share the screen. Sorry for that, but when I talk about the proxy discovery, and this snippet, we are discovering proxy servers, and this is already a way how to maintain a Zabbix session key in a global level. If you set this discovery to execute frequently, every 30 minutes, then it will maintain the session key in a global level. And me personally, I'm exactly using this approach, only I have moved this HTTP agent to the raw item, to the native item inside the template, and I'm passing this information from the native item to the discovery. So I'm discovering the proxies, and also in the same time I have attached a trigger to the native item, which will really detect when the session key was expired, and it will fire up a disaster trigger, and it will send a notification that the session token is not valid anymore, and you will be notified that the session token is not valid anymore.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a really nice workaround. All right. We have to move to Aleksandrs next. Thank you a lot. So I guess really nice, really technically in-depth presentation. Let's try and push those slides out there available for public as soon as possible. So next up, our last speaker before Q&A with Alexei. You already know him from previous meetups. It's Aleksandrs Petrovs-Gavrilovs, a colleague of mine, technical support engineer, consultant trainer, and he's going to be covering pre-processing, a very, very useful, strong functionality. So let's welcome Aleksandrs with pre-processing, how to get what you want to get with 5.0. Welcome.
So hello everyone, nice to finally have the possibility to talk. Hope you've seen some of my previous presentations, so now I will have something to introduce to you again. And this time it will be something simple yet very, very much useful with basically any Zabbix installation, as soon as you use Zabbix, basically. So let me just move something out of the way, and there we go. So what is preprocessing? So, well, basically the preprocessing is working with the data, doing something with the data. In our case, of course not, we will be doing the preprocessing, but Zabbix will be doing it for us. And the main idea is, of course, to get some input data, to get some information, as you usually do with Zabbix. So some information that you will use in monitoring of your environment. But sometimes, of course, this information is not just a plain number. I mean, the bigger the environment, then most certainly you will have something instead of the numbers. Maybe just simple words. Maybe JSON arrays. Maybe it will be SQL queries that with the help of which you will retrieve a lot of data. So it can be anything, and most of the time you don't want to receive all of that at once. Of course, you want to receive something specific, and of course you want to save as much resources as possible, and of course make the data as understandable as possible, all in at once. And that's what we're going to look at today. So I prepared some examples on how exactly you could use the preprocessing to make things easier, not just for you, but for your Zabbix too, since with each item, with each preprocessing, you can save a tiny bit of space that will lead, of course, the more items you have, the more time you will save that tiny bit, leading to your database becoming smaller. Hence, you will require less resources, and of course, everything will be happening a lot faster when we are collecting data and working with the data and trying to just view the data and understand the data. So what is preprocessing in Zabbix? How Zabbix can help you to preprocess the values? Well, in a lot of ways, but the idea, the setup is plus minus the same each time. Since preprocessing in Zabbix requires for you to define at least one or maybe multiple transformation rules for the received item values to actually stop, of course, using preprocessing. If you don't want to preprocess the values, you are not obliged to create any preprocessing rules. All that you will do with the preprocessing will happen before the value actually is saved to the database. And well, that means a lot. That means a lot, especially if we have some kind of, again, XML, JSON output that will require a lot, and we don't want to see that JSON. I mean, that JSON can be not pretty much readable. Of course, it is actually, but definitely not for every user. And we just want to get something specific, and even more, we want to store that something specific in the database, not everything. That's why these transformations will help us a lot. And what we need to remember, the transformations will be executed in the order in which they are defined. That means that don't just mix them up. Just don't throw random preprocessing steps at each item, hoping that something will work. No, they must work, since if just one of them fails and you don't actually set custom on fail, well, it will lead to unsupported items. And of course, for those of you who do not know, preprocessing is also now, well, for quite some time, is now done on the Zabbix proxy side, which again helps you to save some resources from your central data massive, the Zabbix server itself. So in short, why do we need the data preprocessing? Well, for multiple reasons that I've already described, and of course to actually better understand the data. But if we would need to define like 4 main ideas of why we're exactly doing it, well, it's of course because of data cleansing that we always should use to make our monitoring as precise as possible and to see the exactly values we want to see and we should see. And data cleansing is the process which helps us to, well, detect incorrect values and, well, maybe throw them out of monitoring, or maybe again change them in a way that will still make it those errors, those incorrect data points visible to us, but without breaking, well, let's say, the graphs, the correlation of what we're seeing, and definitely without making items unsupported. Then we have the data editing, which is basically, just as it sounds, a way, a possibility to somehow change the data, maybe review what exactly is in it, or to adjust what we want to get in the end to make it again easier to read, or just, well, more convenient for us in our database and our environment overall. Then, of course, the data reduction, which in short brings us, I'm pretty sure most of you know about the dependent items. I won't delve too deep in the master items and dependent items, but the main idea of those is, of course, the data reduction, since with that we can receive basically almost unimaginable amounts of data, push them to Zabbix, and not actually storing them in the Zabbix, but still collecting each value that we are required. And it will save us, again, a lot of time, a lot of resources, and of course, a lot of performance in a bigger picture. And why, we will see in examples that will follow soon enough. And of course, the last one, which sounds quite confusing, but it's an actual word, it's data wrangling. And that basically means to transform the data, to transform the data in something else, to change it maybe to another format. And well, in 5.0, Zabbix also can do that. Actually, Zabbix was able to do it a bit earlier, but we're talking about 5.0 here. So let's just assume that everything is about 5.0 right now. So data cleansing, what can exactly we do to clear out something unneeded, something that we don't want to see, or how can we change something that we don't want to see to something that we want to see and make our data more consistent? Well, there are multiple ways in Zabbix. Is of course by defining specific ranges of information. It's of course also by specifying some regular expressions that will look for an error or whatever we are collecting. Checking on an application level for error message. So maybe application tries to send us some kind of message saying that, hey, I'm actually having an error, please do not collect me, or pay attention to me and try to fix me first. And we don't want to have that error, for example, in a number array, just the word error. It will break everything and again, make an item unsupported. And of course, the same basically thing that I just described, but for specifically XPath. So how that actually looks like if we would like to, and we will look at examples. So let's say we wanted to find a range. Maybe we are collecting something in percentage. Maybe it's a temperature. And we want to have numbers just from 1 to 100. And sometimes we know that occasionally there might be maybe a 0 in case of error, maybe something that other value that we do not want to see and we do not want to keep, and especially we do not want our item to break. We can just discard the value that do not fit in our statistics, and we don't need it. So it will be discarded. Item will continue to work. We will have the data correct, and we will be happy. Our environment will be happy, and our reports that we will present to someone in the future also will look pretty nice. Other way is, of course, to just again have a different range. Maybe for example, you collect the successful logins or successful sessions, but sometimes the sessions are unsuccessful and those are logged with the 0. Why not replace the 0 with 999? So you will still see a bigger jump in the graph, and it will be quite visible when something incorrect happened. And again, item will break, data collection will continue. Other option is, of course, to use a regular expression. And I mean, there's a lot of places you can use regular expressions in Zabbix. I would almost say those are unlimited in amount of where can you use them. And they are also as, well, basically efficient as it possibly can be. So one of the options is, of course, just to define what exactly will be matching, like we see here, match regular expression, and everything that matches this regular expression, the word error, will be basically, for example, discarded, and we'll collect only something that, all that matches error will be collected, everything else will be discarded. Or other option does not match regular expression, error. So why not? Let's discard everything else. So that's absolutely an option. And I did not include any more because mostly the idea is basically the same. But if you want to decide what do you want to collect or you don't want to collect, of course, you know, in Zabbix you can create, for example, global regular expressions or regular expressions to use in specific filters and load discovery. But in case you don't know what exactly you can filter out, well, I've got some examples for you. Of course, the default ones, the built-in ones, but just a bit more possible values added by me. So for the Windows Server startup states, it can be automatic, delayed, manual, or disabled. You want to collect only numbers? Sure, why not? Collect only numbers, and with this expression right here, you will be able to do that. You have maybe a list of domain names. You maybe check domain names, you maybe keep some of domain names, and you want metrics to follow actually the correct syntax of domain names. Well, that's an example. Of course, it can be much more precise. That's a more simple one, but it will work for simple validation of domain names. Or if you may be parsing some chats of your colleagues, I don't know, you can always collect their smiley faces to make yourself happy when you are figuring out about new preprocessing steps. What else? Use JSON path to check for error, or use check for error in XML to check for an error in XML. And if on the line that you specifically provide, so basically in the end of that JSON path, in that location of that XML, there is an error, well, the item will do whatever you set it to. Of course, you can set an error good, so item will stop working at the moment, but you will see at least an error. Or again, you can discard the value, set the value to something. So a lot of new ways of how can you actually clear out something unneeded while still be able to notice it, or if you don't want to notice it because you know that happens, well, to just be calm, collect right data, and not notice any errors. What else? What's next? Data editing, of course. And well, data editing can be as simple as possible. I mean, replace sounds as simple as you just replace a string with a number. Why not? Or string with something else. Trimming using regexes again, multiplying using JavaScript, and that's when it gets tricky. So what can we do with replacing? Well, we can do simple things. We can, for example, find a string error and replace it with 0. But there's a trick with replace. So if the actual item will contain more values, and the error will be like errors, for example, you may get yourself on 0s. That's why make sure you make it a bit more precise if you want to actually replace something completely. And for example, with a regular expression, extract that word error and then replace it with 0. And then you will collect, for example, only those zeros when an error happens. So that's just an option if you monitor, for example, log files. That's for a word error. That's a good idea to actually do that. And save only zeros to your database. But I'm hoping that you won't have a lot of errors, of course, to save. Then the trimming is the simple option. I mean, there's not that many examples you can come with, but you can clearly see a good example of how efficient it can actually be. So you can trim from both sides, trim from the right, trim from the left, almost like a dance. And again, remove something that's actually not allowing you to see the data, or for example, in a more understanding way, or to actually change the format of how the data will be saved in the database. So for example, you can just remove the letters and store it not as a character or character type of data or a string, but as an actual number, an unsigned integer, and save a lot of space just by keeping that value as short as possible and in another format. Want to use more regular expressions? Why not? I've got some more for you. So you can look for network adapters to basically check for your add zeros in your add zeros to actually monitor them. Incoming, outgoing traffic, again, quite useful for your discovery rules, but can be used also for pre-processing. Why not? Short file system regex. I mean, if you want to see a bigger one, I do recommend to visit our documentation or just go to your front end and actually take a look at what pillars do you have there. You will find an even bigger example of the same thing. And of course, SNMP storage devices are also there. So what's next? The multiply, which can be as simple as it gets, but again, very, very efficient. So for example, you want to transform kilobytes to bytes. Since there are a lot of commands, requests, maybe to MySQL, maybe to something else in the Linux, depends, that will return the data, for example, in specifically kilobytes. And you want to actually have bytes and then just use item units to transform it into Zabbix. You can do that by using this simple custom multiplier. Or maybe something retrieves the milliseconds. And milliseconds, while they will be just basically piling up, can become quite confusing and the number will be quite large. Why not transform the seconds and maybe you see uptime in milliseconds, then keeping it in the seconds and then using item units of uptime in your Zabbix would make it a lot more understanding and easier to actually digest, seeing not just thousands and thousands and thousands of milliseconds, but actual seconds getting to the minutes, then to the hours and the days. But note something quite critical. If you use multiplying and, for example, you use fractionals and that is kept in the unsigned, those, of course, will be trimmed just a bit, but a bit enough to actually make values completely different. So remember that 0.9 will actually become a 0 before the custom multiplier is applied, and that will lead to zeros, and that will lead to not exactly specific data. So make sure you keep the information in float when it needs to be in float, or multiply by correct numbers when it needs to be unsigned. Don't make an error. And now some more efficient examples. So it was actually introduced by the great Zabbix developers, but the presentation was specifically about the JavaScript. I do recommend to view it, but that's a great example of how much you can do with the JavaScript itself. So you can actually get the time until the end of certificate and make a simple trigger out of it, not just getting, as you can see, the value with months and a month in words, with the string GMT for the time zone, and trying to figure out how can I will do this trigger for it, how can I work with it. Just use the JavaScript. You can copy and paste it in your environment, and you will have time in seconds before the certificate ends. Again, quite easy to make a trigger out of it. Have printers in your environment, have all the SNMP devices in your environment that actually shows their uptime with date and time. And date and time is basically hexadecimal. And as you can see, this requires a lot to actually transform it to something much more understandable. And when you receive that, and when you look at this, you will just see what is this value? I don't understand it. How can I explain to people? Well, with the help of a bit of JavaScript preprocessing and of course the value itself, you will see something much more easier to read. And I specifically for you converted it to actual today's date. So again, use it in case you have some devices or printers that actually return the data in hexadecimal. But there's also an additional option how to transform hexadecimal to something more reasonable, and we are getting to it soon enough. We will see it. We want to reduce the data. So I'm pretty sure some of you saw our webinars, some of you maybe attended the trainings. We have a lot of information there how exactly you can use that. So I tried to limit it to the minimum because I don't have a lot of time. So how can you reduce the XML size, the JSON size? How can you use throttling, and how can you again use replace? Quite simple. So an XML will look something like this. This is just an example. You may have any XML that is plus or minus in the correct format, and then use XMLint to actually get to some specific values. And since we do remember that we can actually combine our preprocessing steps, why shouldn't we? So why not follow the specific XML path, as you can see right here, to get some specific service and its state? Then, of course, we can use the regular expression to actually find and check if it's a specific word, in this case active, and then just replace this word active with the number 1. And then, hey, you can also add some value mapping in your Zabbix, and then you will see, you will collect in the database the number 1, but in Zabbix you will see the actual state app. And I mean, look at this and look at the number 1. You can save a lot. You can save a lot with each check that you actually do, and still get all the data. Let's say you're having the path of the JSON, so it also even simpler. And if you're worried that you don't have, for example, a data array and you're not sure how exactly to get something in there, you can use it just like that. And don't worry about the dots. Just use the square brackets and the quotes to actually get it, and the numbers out there for you. You have your Tomcat-free memory. Don't forget to transform it through the bytes. Don't leave it just as I did, and you will get a nice-looking, precise value for you. You heard a lot about throttling already, so I also did not include a lot, but I included now for you to actually see the biggest difference. So before the throttling, as you know, Zabbix, of course, kept everything in the database just as, well, it is expected. And everything that was pushed to Zabbix eventually ended up in Zabbix. Now with throttling, you can actually keep, again, only the values when they are changing, again, saving you twice the data, thrice the data, depends on how often your values actually change in your database. Again, making it grow slower, saving you a lot of resources. Did you know you can actually use replace twice? Well, if you didn't, now you do. And depending on what you get, the replace can react differently. So if at the first step you get up, it stays 1, and again, you will just get 1, and you will see the word up in the end. If you get the word down, it won't be changed, but it will be changed on the second replace step, and basically transform to 0 and get down. So an easier Boolean if you're not sure how to use Boolean. But I also will show you, of course, how to use Boolean too. So if you want to transform Boolean to decimal, which is quite simple, you just basically transform one positive, one negative value, just as you see an example right below, to ones and zeros, saving you, again, a lot of potential space. And still, you can use value mapping to make it readable, to make it useful, to make it efficient. Don't know, since, for example, for some time I actually was quite confused where can I use octal and hexadecimal, and why do I need to transform to decimal? Well, quite simple. The simplest, the fastest example that comes to mind, for example, some memory types in Linux are in, for example, specifically octal, and you can transform that octal to decimal to actually get, for example, bytes, megabytes, or, well, depends on your amount of memory. And hexadecimal is just like with the JavaScript example. So if you have printers, holders, and AP devices, you can actually transform hexadecimal to decimal and see again something that you use on every day. If you're wondering what is decimal, it's basically the numbers that we work with every day. So I don't know, counting money, maybe something else. So your usual set of numbers to actually understand. Want to transform CSV to JSON? Again, you can do it quite simply. Just make sure you have quite a straight format, which should have an equal amount of values for each row. Then again, use CSV to JSON to actually find something you're looking for, and then JSON path to again find something else. Or maybe use CSV to JSON and then just put your CSV into a low-level discovery rule. Prometheus pattern also there for you. So that's how Prometheus usually looks like. I hope you know. And you can just define a specific pattern to get a specific value. And you won't need to, again, keep all this in your database. You will be keeping this small one number by retrieving this parameter, which is actually available right here for you. Simple change. Sometimes it's not very clear, but simple change is basically calculating what is the difference between the values, the one that we received currently and the previous one. And again, just in a simple example, this is how it will look like. It's quite simple. You just basically collect the changes. So this is very helpful when you are maybe monitoring, for example, traffic. But with traffic, you actually can use something much better, the change per second, which will actually calculate and show you the time, the amount of data that is being collected each second, as you can see in an example right here. So how does all of this work? So it is quite simple. It's the schema. You can also find this in the documentation. So I did not redraw it to make it beautiful. I made it as it is. So everything starts, of course, with the preprocessing manager that actually passes the values and stores them in the queue. Once the value is in the queue, well, the manager checks how the preprocessing workers are actually loaded, how much are there, and of course checking which are free of them. Then all those tasks are basically assigned to a specific preprocessing worker after manager decides who is not doing anything today, not preprocessing all those not nicely looking numbers. And as soon as it is done, preprocessing worker starts executing all the tasks. And as soon as the value basically is preprocessed, it will be stored again in the queue. And well, if there's no more preprocessing to be done with that value that came out after one of the steps, well, it will be, of course, transformed to the specific data type that you actually used, and only that will be stored and will basically sent to the database to be stored. But there's also a catch, since some of, I would say, values are better than other values, but not better, actually, just a bit more critical, especially since those are what shows how our Zabbix performs. Remember that internal items are always placed at the beginning of the preprocessing queue, while other ones, of course, will be after them. So make sure you assign an appropriate number of preprocessing workers so everybody has enough. But you can do that in, of course, the configuration file of your Zabbix server or proxy. What improvements came with 5.0? Since I'm done with the examples, I just want to let you know how efficient it actually is now. So you can now create, again, for one master item, almost 30,000 dependent items, 30,000 without one. Memory usage became significantly lower. You can actually click on those after, and I hope the slides will be available. I'm sure they will, but you can actually read about that. So, of course, the more data you actually push to your Zabbix as a master item, for example, the more it will need memory to actually preprocess those values. And at some point, when you actually create, 15K dependent items worth of 200 kilobytes, they will need a lot of RAM. And if it's proxy, this can be a big amount of RAM. For the server, maybe, well, not so much, depending on your environment, but for the proxy, it can be a lot. Now, after the changes, it will need just 4 and 6 megabytes, and it will be the peak, and it will be busy in price lower than it was before. Now, dependent items which were disabled are actually excluded from the pre-processing configuration, as they should have been, of course, but still, it was, well, a pretty big change, and now, again, it will save you quite some resources, and they won't be pre-processed as they should be. And since there was some specifics that may proxy keep actually the history storage, the data that was configured for history storage with 0. Now it actually does not. And again, so the proxy does the processing as efficiently as it gets without actually needing a lot of resources. But you might need some resources to actually figure out your own pre-processing steps. And those are the examples that I use. There's a lot more. There's also good examples of what can you use, for example, for regular expressions of documentation. But that's about it from me. I try to do it as fast as possible. There's a lot of slides, and I hope you will use eventually those somewhere in your own environment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you a lot for the presentation. Very valuable. Pre-processing is always really nice to have. So let's see. A couple of quick questions for you before we move on to Alexei. So, is it possible to add a global macro? Probably we're talking about a built-in macro in JSON pre-processing step.
In JSON pre-processing step?
So use a macro the part of that JSON path, for example.
I actually did not try, but that's a good question. I should have tried that. The best things come from the questions always. But I assume it could have been. But also there's a specific syntax for JSON path, so I won't give a precise answer from my head right now.
Okay, just need to test it and figure it out.
Hey, this is Aigars here. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can confirm this is possible, 100%.
Okay, thank you a lot. Thank you, Aigars. Next up, throttling. Doesn't this lead to gaps in the data, graphs, things like that?
Well, in graphs, of course, it will lead, but we also have the pre-processing with a heartbeat that actually allows you to execute one additional check in the interval you define yourself, and that will connect the graphs for you, so they will look nice. But of course, if you use jumped a bit. So if you use throttling, make sure you preferably do not use the no data triggers, since there will be gaps.
Okay, and last question before we give the word to Alexei. Would you recommend using replace pre-processing step instead of value mapping?
Value mapping is a bit of a different thing. So if you want to actually replace words with numbers, then yes, of course, I would recommend to use replace. But value mapping just, again, shows you the data more described in the front end. The value mapping is not stored in the database. So you just use replace and value mapping together to make information more clear for you or for anyone who will use your front end.
Okay, thank you. You still have a couple of questions, a Q&A session, so please do take a look over there and if possible answer them. Since we're kind of behind, I'd like to move on to kind of the dessert part of this meetup, the Q&A with Alexei Vladishev. Alexei, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, are you ready for some questions?
Well, for some.
For some. All right. So let's just begin right off the top, the first ones that came in. So regarding Docker images, they are still marked as in development on the GitHub. When do we plan to, I guess, kind of officially state that they're ready and not in development anymore? Is that planned, or how do we approach that?
Well, I think it stays kind of an experimental state. For some years now already. I guess this is a mistake that we need to fix. Yeah, basically, the Docker images are widely used by us actually, and also by many users around. So, well, I think we'll fix it very soon. So we'll just we'll make it officially available. Sorry, that's something that we didn't do before.
Thank you. Next up, a technical question. So regarding the UI and API performance and scalability,
Yes.
any plans to use some sort of shared cache between these components? For example, like we have, history caches and things like that, something like that for the API. So at the end of the day, we don't talk directly to the database with API requests.
Possibly. At this moment, we've been looking in a little bit different direction. We tried to make kind of the UI component fully independent so that it will not depend on any external state. That's why it will be very easy to make a load balancing. So one node will not have any direct or indirect dependency on something else, on kind of shared state. Yeah. So, but in the future, I would expect some kind of a caching layer. Maybe not for the UI itself, but more for the API. Yeah, it may come at some point. Some sort of, I wouldn't say like kind of memcache type of thing, but something in this direction. Yeah, it may come.
Thank you a lot. Really nice to hear that it may come. I will also probably appreciate it. Next up, reports, the usual one. Anything on the roadmap about reports, creating reports, scheduling them, something like that?
Yes, actually, I have already included it into the roadmap of 6.0. I have to check if it's already published or not. Please be aware that the information on our website is still work in progress, so maybe it doesn't have the up-to-date information. But what we are looking for ability to create and execute the scheduled report. So some sort of reports you may want to send to your customers if you're monitoring your customer environments using Zabbix, or some sort of executive summary reports you may find maybe in some other system that's needs to be implemented. At this moment, we are we are thinking how it might be implemented in the best possible way from the technical point of view. But yeah, that's one of the, I fully understand that it is one of kind of the pain points of Zabbix users, the reporting functionality of Zabbix. It's still, it needs to be improved in a big way. Yeah, it is coming, and hopefully it will be ready by Zabbix 6.0 in a 1 year time.
Thank you. I think I remember we had the same question during one of our previous meetups, because I think you have already answered before. So quite a common one. Next up, host level dependencies. Do we plan on implementing those, or are they coming, not coming?
Well, I don't think so. In the way how you describe it, like one host depends on another host, I don't think this is the right thing to do. I believe we should think more about kind of service level dependencies, or dependencies between one component and another component. And host is not a good thing to to map those kind of service level dependencies, right? What we did in 5.0, you probably know that we now have a dependency, kind of implicit dependency on a proxy availability, so that if proxy goes down, you won't be alerted about host behind those proxy being down, because Zabbix is smart enough to understand that it's all because of proxy availability, That's what is been implemented in 5.0. I think it helps a lot in many cases, but I don't think that a very simple and straightforward host level dependency will be implemented. Because remember, it's something not in line with the philosophy on Zabbix. When you have, you may have multiple triggers describing availability of a certain device. And it's more, it should be made more on a level of, event correlations. When Zabbix generates some event and then it understands that it has a dependency on other events which are generated. So I believe, And this is something that might be addressed in 5.4. If you look at the roadmap, you could see there is event correlation model, and I think it will help very much once implemented.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you a lot. I think I somewhat agree with you on this. Yes. Then two common questions. First off, controlling Zabbix configuration, so poller counts and things like that. Currently, we need to, of course, restart our server when we say change the number of pollers. Any plans to change that so we can change them dynamically without, restarting the whole environment?
Yeah, it may possibly come in the future, right? I think we have to be careful about making such changes, because all the things related to kind of automatic configuration of something can be dangerous in some way. Yeah, because you may have, for example, kind of spikes of activities of certain processes, maybe a high activity, maybe hourly high activity of your pollers, and you don't want really Zabbix to scale up and down too often, yeah, because of this. So we need to be careful with such cases. But anyway, at this moment, for example, another thing to be aware of is that many Zabbix processes requires a kind of direct database connection, yeah. And of course, we need to be careful thinking about the limitations on the database side. Yeah, if we say launch lots of processes, lots of pollers, it may really put some stress on the back end. Yeah. So, but from the other hand, at this moment, we are moving slowly, not to kind of process model for Zabbix server and Zabbix proxies, also for Zabbix agent, but more to kind of thread. Maybe I'm talking in some development terms, yeah, but kind of thread models, kind of lightweight processes. And having those implemented will help to achieve kind of automatic scaling up and scale down much more easily. So we are moving to this direction slowly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Then another one that I have heard quite a lot, maybe a bit less technical, but for HTTP items, so let's say we need to store some sort of a session token or something. Native, there isn't necessarily a way to do it, and to keep it updated, for example. Do we have any plans on changing that on HTTP items?
Well, actually, I think starting from Zabbix 5.4, we will have a very nice workaround. I've been talking about the synthetic monitoring, and it's something that may help in this case. So in 5.4, or possibly it could even be implemented in 5.2, I just have to check what's the progress on this. We'll have support of so-called script items. Script item is basically ability to write a JavaScript which can do anything, yeah? You write a JavaScript, it may connect to one HTTP endpoint, then retrieve some, say, authentication token out of it, and then maybe store this authentication token in a remote, I don't know, say, memcache service, then connect to another HTTP point, do something else, and so on and so on. So basically, it may help you to do some and implement some shared storage, actually. So this is one thing. And another thing, I think, and I believe it's also included into the roadmap, I need to check if it's publicly available or not right now, is about ability to, I don't know, to create some sort of monitoring scenarios made out of several items, several independent metrics. So in this case, you may group, for example, a few HTTP, HTTP calls, and tell that, okay, Zabbix should execute the first metric first, and second metric, and the third metric. And also, again, if we do this with the combination of the script item, of the new type of item, which is coming in Zabbix 5.4, it will also help to maintain the shared status. And obviously, for the synthetic monitoring, there will be ability to reuse value which we received before, say on the first step for the first metric, for the second metric. Okay, so that's how it may work, and I think this will be a solution to your issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. We have a couple of more questions, so I think we won't be holding you up for too much longer. So just 2-3 more questions. Let's see. Next up, will Zabbix support receiving pushed data in the future, other than SMP traps and Zabbix trappers?
Yeah, I'd like to see it implemented. Yeah, and it is also in our roadmap, by the way. So that's all about ability to receive data using, say, REST API. I believe it will be part of Zabbix Agent, so that Zabbix, you deploy Zabbix Agent 2, you enable kind of HTTP trapping module, and it will listen certain port and accept, I don't know, HTTP or HTTPS traffic, and basically convert it into normal values. So that's how it may work, at least in my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is coming. Yeah.
Really nice to hear that most of these features actually are on the roadmap. I think that kind of signifies that we're going in the right direction, definitely. Last question. I'm not going to read it out loud full on. I'm just going to kind of try and summarize it. So it kind of speaks about Zabbix's place in the monitoring market and its competition. Like, so generally, how do you feel how we are doing when we're talking about competition, I guess? How Zabbix as a product is doing? How do you feel about it? Like our competition and our place between it?
Yeah, I think we are doing very well, and I believe that being a free and open source gives us a huge advantage. Yeah, in terms of just the broader use of Zabbix, in terms of just Zabbix as a good product that fits by basically everyone. Yeah, so regardless of how much money you are going to spend on the monitoring tool, yeah, because Zabbix is free basically. Yeah. So this is one very important advantage of Zabbix, and I think the second advantage is that again we are really trying to make Zabbix as flexible as possible. We are not trying to kind of maybe target a specific niche in the monitoring, yeah? And because of this, Zabbix is quite often becomes some sort of umbrella monitoring for the whole enterprise when it combines all essential functionality you may expect from a monitoring tool. So this is a data collection, the real-time problem detection, anomaly detection, and alerting and visualization, all built into a single and again free and open source package. So I'm really happy about the progress we are making, about the improvements we are delivering every 6 months in new major releases. So I think, we are doing fine, and thanks to all our users and community members for your support.
Mm-hmm. And we actually, just one last question came in. I think we have the time to just quickly answer it, since I think you will also have a lot to say about it. So database, splitting up configuration and history data. Do we have any plans for that?
Yeah, what we already have, and it is in 5.4 roadmap. So just have a look. It's about, or maybe it's, I'm not sure it's published or not. Sorry. Yeah. So, but anyway, it is kind of in my internal roadmap. It's about introducing our own history API. So that in this case, it would be possible to basically to use a different, I would call it adopters, which would convert our API in the native API of some time series database you want to use. For example, you want to use, I don't know, InfluxDB, no problem. You want to use something else, no problem as well. You just install a new component, which would basically convert our history API calls into those native API calls. So this is coming, and it will really help maybe third-party developers and maybe our partners and the customers to write your own integrations with any databases you want. You want to have a kind of the integration with the Elastic, no problem. You want to have some people are asking, okay, why not store history data in MongoDB? I say it's a bad idea, but if it feels like a good idea, you could implement it. You could implement it as well. But I'm mostly looking forward for having Zabbix connected with the time series databases, which are aimed to be used for keeping time series data for performance, for higher availability. So yeah. So history API, this is what is coming in Zabbix 5.4, and it could be used for many interesting things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, myself, I'm now really excited. I'd like to see some use cases coming from our community members. All right, that's it for the questions. Maybe you have something to say to our community members. Anything from your side?
Well, I just want to say, everyone, thank you for being with us for these 2 hours already, I guess. And yeah, there will be more. So we are getting close to release of Zabbix 5.2. So stay connected, stay tuned. There will be much more detailed information coming from Zabbix and our partners. And well, see you next time then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexei, a lot. See you next time. All right. So that pretty much concludes our 4th meetup. But before you go, guys, let me remind you that we have our summit, our online summit coming up. This time completely free. There is a fan package available. You're going to get some merchandise if you do buy it. But other than that, you can just attend completely for free. It's going to be an all-day event. And I mean all day, not like 5 hours or 6 hours. It's going to be like 16 hours or something like that. It's going to be really crazy. A lot of interesting use cases, a lot of talks from our internal support team, Alexei himself, and so on. So a lot of new things, and this time for free. So if you haven't ever attended, this is your chance to take a look at how it feels like network. We're going to figure out a couple of ways. We have a couple of methods to make it super exciting, even though it's online, to ensure that networking goes without a hitch. So you'll have networking tools available. You will have a way to communicate with us directly, engineering team, Alexei, and so on. Ask your questions. You can also, there's a call for paper ongoing. So I do have a date over here. Call for paper deadline is tomorrow. So if you do have a great idea that you want to present paper ready, you can always send it to us, and you can then present your own Zabbix use case to thousands of people online completely for free. So there you go. That was it. That's the 4th meetup. Thank you a lot, guys. It was a real pleasure seeing you all here in such large numbers as always. And keep your eye out, yes, for version 5.2 coming out soon, and any further online events. And then, of course, let's wait for the summit. I'm really excited myself. Can't wait to see how many people are going to attend and the whole scope of it online. All right, guys. Thank you. It was a real pleasure seeing you here, and see you next time. See you on the forums. See you in IRC, in chats, Reddit, and so on. Thank you, guys. Bye. Have a great rest of the day.